So I'm going to present to you how we have been using ClickHouse over the past few years around how we are building queries. Because over time, we just started with a POC at the beginning, and now we try to have something more mature. So I'm Yohann Jardin, senior data engineer at Contentsquare. The team I'm working with is responsible for maintaining the technical stack that we have in the data team. And one of the major projects that I'm going to talk a little bit during this talk is called ClickHouse 4S. It's a client to build ClickHouse queries in Scala. So a few words about Contentsquare. We are a SaaS company. We fetch metrics from how people are browsing online. And we then try to provide metrics to website owners. That way they can see what works, what doesn't work. And what's very important is that we have like dozens and dozens of metrics, many different visualizations, and we are using ClickHouse to boost all that. And so building queries is very challenging to have something that is harmonized throughout the teams. So at the very beginning, it was a time where we were moving from Elasticsearch to ClickHouse. So the idea was we cannot create many new features, business features, because we cannot code that into, well, for two databases that are very different at the same time. So we started small. We got a model, and the aim of the model was to know what are the select fields that we want, what is the from clause, the where clause, the order by, etc. But very small. You can see all the hard-coded strings that we had, like marvelous code, easy to handle. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. Something that is very important in the company is that our customers can filter data on specific group of customers, like the people who click on a specific button. That way they can really dig into the data. So this is something that's available throughout the solution. And so for these reasons, we build some helpers that create the conditions that are available everywhere. So just saying, yeah, we don't want to duplicate everything. Like we try to have a way to say, yeah, it's not so ugly as a code. And lastly, we did a small optimizer. We knew it would be important. We cannot expect everyone to build the perfect query from the get-go, and there are different parts of the queries written at different places in the code base, especially to avoid duplications. And so at the beginning, it was just if you have a condition A and condition A again, we would just keep one of them. It was not really useful, but for the beginning. 1 year later, there is much less hard-coded strings, but it's much better. The gray fields are things that didn't change so far. But what happens, and we can see, is that we created some functions and a beginning of a domain-specific language. So for example, we got the method unique exact if, and this time we know that we have 2 arguments. And yeah, at least we have the good number of arguments. Still, we can see that we have something called as SQL string. It was actually giving a string. So not perfect, but at least it started to look like something. The most important thing that we improved was the optimizer. There is something that was tremendous in terms of performance gain, which was in your where clause, if you have multiple subqueries, like a given field in subquery and that same field in another subquery, there are many cases where you could build a single subquery by joining the conditions in the subquery. Having as few subqueries as possible was very, very important. But then this was the end of the migration. You know, at the beginning, I said, well, we told the product team, hey guys, could you limit the number of new features? And so what happened? I said, woohoo, new features! And we ended up with a super complex code because the beginning of DSL that we built was just not ready for that. And we had many abstractions on top of ClickHouse functions. That way, when you wanted to build a array filter, for example, well, you did not write array filter. What you wrote was things like ch filter hash zone condition. So when you want to understand the code, what's happening, you dive in a little part, you go back, you try to enter another part, and yeah. You see where I'm going? We got feedback from the team. They say, yeah, working with that is time consuming. There is code duplications in the end because array filters, there are 10 ways to do it. It's a headache to work with that. We got someone who said, yeah, when I'm working with this DSL, actually, for new features, I need to update it. So because I update it, I need to test everything again because I cannot break the product. We got people saying, yeah, when I want to test a new function of ClickHouse that we are not yet using in the company, we have to test, check the documentation, how it's supposed to work, and see with our version of ClickHouse how it works. And sometimes there were some back and forth, and yeah, it was a pain. But what summarized everything is someone who said, yeah, we build queries, the code compiles, then I need to push that in a pre-production environment or specific ways. And I got full of surprise because it was often not working from the first time. So it was super frustrating for the team. At that time, we went to see the managers and we told them, hey, let's start from scratch. Let's build our own client. You can believe that they were very anxious to say, yes, let's rework our code base, like completely. And I want to talk to you in this part about what were the pillars and what made this project work. The first thing that I believe was super important is to determine actually what is important. In this journey of building queries, we had faced many hardships and we learned from that. We finally knew what we wanted. The first one was we want queries that looks like a ClickHouse query in the CLI. Why? Because people who comes to ClickHouse, they know the CLI, you need to know it. But then do you want to know a new way to write queries for your code? No, because in terms of onboarding of new people, it means that they have to almost learn two NoSQL language in a way. The second point was type safety. In your code, you want to know that when you are calling a functions, you are providing the right types. If it's expecting a number, you give it a number. You don't give it a string. It just doesn't work. And it's very important because, for example, when you add two things, well, you can put a date plus a number, but you cannot put a number plus a date. It doesn't work. So there are many tricks in the functions, and it's not easy to know what is going to work easily. Third point is very easy, but no business logic, at least not if it's a library. First, because you test the technology, and other people will test the business. It's also because we have seen the abstraction before in the code. You don't want to have to really understand the abstraction to understand what's going on. Last point is the fact that it needs to be secure. Secure for me is two things. Secure is security. Do I have some SQL injection in my code? Yeah, you can try to think about it yourself and do it every time. You will miss it. Even if it's one time out of 10,000, it's one too much. So you want it inside the library. You want it by default so that people cannot make the mistake. Second one about secure is when I execute my code in production, I want it to work. So when I call a function, I want to make sure that the function exists and has the right number of parameters. So those were our pillars. And it was very important because just after saying, okay, this is our pillars, Actually, we didn't start it and say, yes, let's build a new client. Obviously, we are developers, so we love building things. Still, the first thing to say is people have been there before us. What did they do? Is there something that works for me? And if not, still, what did they do that was well? And then I want to get inspired by that. Slick, it is a SQL-based library, very famous in Scala. Obviously, it doesn't support ClickHouse functions, like array functions, etc. But still, for example, in the type safety, it was very smart. They built tables, and you have to define the fields and their types. And then you use that to build the query. It was very smart. Crowbox, on the other side, is a company that already released a Scala client for ClickHouse. So it's very specialized for that. And we thought that it would be a good match. Actually, there are some parts of their client that is not completely building a query like you would with ClickHouse. It's mainly revolving around the combinators. In ClickHouse, it's just a function name. In Crowbox, you had to call, for example, count or average, then dot if, and you provide the condition, dot or default, dot state, dot merge, etc. So it's just chaining function. It's not exactly what we wanted. And you know that actually, if you stray from the path of your pillars, well, people will just get unhappy with what you are building. Why? Because you choose your pillars based on the feedbacks of people. So you know that if you don't fulfill your promise, they will be unhappy. And even if you do something that is almost perfect but has one imperfection, I can tell you that at Contentsquare, people on the rooftop during parties will tell you, I remember that, it's a pain. So you don't want that. Type safety was there at many places, but not everywhere. So that was another issue. And on the secure parts, they don't support different versions of ClickHouse, meaning that because there are some regressions sometimes from one version to another, there are methods that gain new parameters, new arguments. Yeah, well, I can't tell with Crowbox today if I use that function, will it work when I deploy? So that was the last issue. Still, it was pretty advanced in terms of library, and we are really inspired from their code in terms of, okay, for example, the combinators, how did they do and why? And actually, that's my third tip, combinators. So you have an infinite number of methods in ClickHouse, because, for example, you take the combinator array, you can put it an infinite number of times after count. There is no limit. So what we did in that, to focus on our pillar, was to say, we are going to build some code that generates those functions with the right types, and then we'll build the test on top of it to check that everything is really working. So it's one of the parts of the code that is the most complex, the most documented, the most tested. But still, it was really going the hard way, and we spent like 3 weeks on that. And we support aggregated function with up to 3 combinators, so most use cases. So at the end of this journey, which is where we stand today, we can build functions, write functions like you can see on the left. And if you check, you have aggregated functions, you got your array functions with lambda, and the lambda just looks like what you have on the right. The only difference, actually, visual difference between the two, is that we created a variable, that way we'll reuse it in the having. This is how we say, the C superior or equal superior to 0 is the right type, because we know it from the result of count array. When we ended up there, we asked for some feedback to know, okay, we spent actually like 70 days overall on this project. Is it going to be used? We did some round of feedbacks along the way, but still at the end, this is what is important. And the first feedback that we got is, when I use this library, writing query feels natural. It's the same as using the CLI. Like it was, bam, first pillar, okay, we got it. It was like, whew. The other part is, with an import, you can access all the functions that we built, which is basically half of what is available in ClickHouse. And so you have the autocomplete on all functions, and you got a documentation of each of them. That way you know what the function is going to be, and you don't need to do some back and forth between the documentation of ClickHouse and this. And one good point was someone who told, I got a compiled query, and now I know it's working. And I think that was the best feedback. Okay. Obviously, the journey, this is not the end. Okay, we built a client, we are using it, but ClickHouse is very a component that is critical for our business. So we need to invest in it. The client was the first part, but we cannot stop there. And developers want more, especially when something starts to work. So I'm going to talk very quickly about 3 things. It's just ideas, very important. We started nothing on those. But this is things that we could do for the future. The first one, very easy. We take ClickHouse 4S and we open source it. That would be one of the things that we can do. The second one, ClickHouse Query Serializer. So at Contentsquare, we are using mainly 2 languages in the data team. We have Scala and we have Go. And there are mainly, well, not mainly, a lot of people are coding in Go. This is like the new language that we started using. And many people would like to contact ClickHouse in Go. But what we've seen before is that for duplication reasons, there are many parts, the conditions, how to say that a specific person clicked on a button, etc., is something we built in Scala, and if we cannot afford ourselves to duplicate it. So we would like to be able to serialize the condition in Scala, deserialize it in Go, keeping the type safety, keeping the possibility to optimize the query that is built in Go after that. So something to interact between different languages. The last one that we have in mind will be ClickHouse Doctor. It would be a monitoring tools on top of metrics that ClickHouse is providing and working on. Something that checks the query logs, that checks the system metrics, and that gives feedbacks to the developers who wrote queries. That way, so you have a graphical interface. You say, okay, I'm new in that company. I've never used ClickHouse before. How do I know if my query is efficient or not? And you can tell them, you can give them training, etc., but along the way, there will always be mistakes. So the idea is to have with a tool, something that will guide you, that will check, hey, your table has a sorting key with these fields, but in your workflows, the ordering of the fields doesn't make much sense. You must put the sorting fields first, or the conditions those. That way it's more efficient. The query will be faster. And not everyone knows that the order of the condition in the workflows have an importance, but they do. And that's the kind of thing that ClickHouse Doctor, in my opinion, could help people with. It helps the onboarding, and it helps people know how to use ClickHouse. So as you can see, we've been a long way already to write queries. And now that we can write queries and maintain that, the next step that we will go forward is how to build good queries. Thank you. So you got the time for one question, I think? Yeah, one question. So, wait, hold on. Wait. And of course, I will be available. I will stay until the end of the event. So if you have any questions, you can talk to me after.
So mainly, ClickHouse is a new interface for SQL with adding some new features and with some classes inside the SQL, let's say. It's like that?
Yes, exactly. It's tell me if I'm wrong, Alexei, like yes or no, but I think you are supporting basically SQL 2003, something like that, yes. And on top of it, there are many additional functions, and the ones that we are using the most at Contentsquare are array functions.
RF?
Array functions. So array filter, array map, etc. So we have big tables with nested structure in those.
Okay.
And to browse that data and to provide the metrics to our customers, we are using those advanced functions.
Okay. Thanks.